I recently came across the opportunity to play Streets of Rogue. The game is currently in open-ish alpha on PC. A quick synopsis would be something like The Escapists meet Deus Ex, but that doesn't even come close. It has elements of RPGs, stealth action games, classic problem-solving isometric games like Syndicate, co-op beat-em-ups, item and resource management, and roguelike procedurally generated levels in permadeath. I've put in around 10 hours in Streets of Rogue so far. In the first 3 or so hours of play, I found the game to be completely engrossing, but somewhat easy. I spent more time trying to solve the objectives necessary and advancing to the next level as quickly as possible. As someone typically would, I found myself leaning towards more self-explanatory and easier characters, like the hacker, soldier, assassin, wrestler, etc. When taking that approach, I quickly grew tired of the grind and often felt the game lacked long-distance appeal. See suggestions. I typically ended between levels 2-2 and 3-2 when difficulty started to ramp up and my lack of interest in character development reached its peak. Still, I couldn't stop playing. After the first 3 hours, my approach started to slow down. Instead of trying to advance, I found myself spending more time exploring each floor and testing different interactions without concern for how far I advanced or not. It was a slow process, but I found myself more excited to play and explore harder characters like the Doctor, Bartender, or Vampire. I often didn't make it past floor set 1, but the thrill was entirely in discovering different strategies and exploring interactions. Where I am now is somewhere else entirely. There were several characters I had previously strayed completely away from because of difficulty, like the cop, the gang members, the gorilla, etc. Now I am trying my best to embrace each and every character in order to discover a perfect strategy for every stage. I've reached a point where I can assess most levels completely in a quick glance, whereas it previously took multiple walks around. At the same time, I can also see potential strategies to almost every situation and plan accordingly almost immediately. This is not only for marked quest objectives, but also any objective worthy of loot or experience. It's this kind of zen-like balance between speed and completion that's led to my suggestions about speedrunning and scoring, noted later. I've also found the game feels overall harder than it did previously, and I'm not sure why. Perhaps it's because of familiarity, or simply my attempts to do more in each level that has led to more early failures than not. Not to mention, I will often attempt to do self-imposed extraneous tasks, such as knocking out every single NPC in the level as Doctor, or going out of my way to incite every crepe bland gang member within a level to attack each other. Optimizing my playthrough each level has become a kind of playstyle in itself. There's a much deeper level of play that can be found and a much higher level of enjoyment in optimization. I found myself using previously used characters in entirely new ways. For instance, I initially used the wrestler as a mainly attack-based character, but when I went back at it much later, I found myself completely avoiding melee weapons in favor of using his ability to grab and throw objects as his primary method of attack. Even grasping the game as much as I have, I still feel there is a great deal I haven't discovered yet, and I'm still not competent in skills to reach higher levels. Speaking of optimization, I'm amazed at how complete the game is in its current state. I've encountered no game-breaking bugs, only a few strange glitches here and there, and a diminished frame rate in levels where there are too many NPCs. This is also the only PC game I've ever played that natively worked and correctly mapped my DualShock 4 controller. I used the mouse and keyboard for the first 5 or so hours, but after testing the use of a controller, I found it much easier to interact with objects in the environment while moving, but slightly more difficult with the aim, though this is because of the camera and not the controller. Overall, I feel the use of a controller is much more suited to Streets of Rogue, and I'm glad to see the developer has put in the effort to ensure ease and compatibility. Even without music or metagame persistence, I feel the game is pretty much ready to go. It's easily the most engrossing game I've played all year, and it's been the first game in a long time I've woken up in the morning and desired to play. If I had to make a comparison to its overall addictiveness, challenge, and depth that it creates excitement, I'd have to compare it directly with Spelunky and The Binding of Isaac. I'm equally excited to submit this, along with my attached suggestions, to the developer, Matt Dabrowski. Firstly, and I don't want to make this seem like a comparison to other games, but I feel the nature of Streets of Rogue would lean heavily towards a score system. The XP system is excellent and does reward a good deal of extracurricular objectives, but an overall persistent score would create a much more roguelike competitive scale. A score system would give a reason to play the game beyond just the nature of solving objectives and moving forward. It would encourage people to spend more time exploring individual levels and stretch out the gameplay experience. It also gives the individual a marker of successful play, i.e., how do I know I did better this run than last run, my best run was X, etc. In the same way, it builds a healthy and engaging level of competition into what is otherwise a single-player experience. Even without an in-game leaderboard, there are always those who hunger for competition and desire to show off their score or to simply spend more time in a game to improve themselves in pursuit of a higher score. Even more so, it would add an interesting dynamic to co-op play to separate each player's score, thereby creating fun couch co-op competition. In the same manner, I feel that there should be more emphasis on the round timer. While the game does keep track of how much time you spend in a given level, as I stated earlier, there's an interesting feeling of excitement and anticipation when you get to a point of not only solving the objectives, but solving them quickly. I made the comparison to Spelunky, and I feel this is very appropriate. In Spelunky, the object is to progress as quickly as possible. There are penalties for lingering, while also collecting as many persistent resources as possible. A difficult but rewarding balance. When you add a timer and a score system, it creates a kind of skill floor where players have a direct correlation to their play based on a scale of points, something video games have been doing almost since their inception. If a player simply wants to avoid being restricted by a score or timer, they simply ignore it, which players have done with games like Binding of Isaac. It's there to separate casual from high-level play, and both players are satisfied. If anything Binding of Isaac has shown us is that even in this kind of roguelike environment, high-level competitive play certainly exists. Beyond this, my only other suggestions relate to character selection and persistence. My first suggestion is to simply change the breakdown of stats from numbers to pictures. A simple rectangle per point would do. Instead of reading endurance 3/4, it would show 3 pips, something like a graph. I feel it would be visually easier to compare characters against each other, and much easier to judge a character both prior and during play. I would also like to see a character difficulty stat, X out of 4 like other stats, added, just to help players understand different roles immediately, and sounds appealing to me personally. You could go so far as to use this attribute to judge score, i.e. a higher difficulty would result in a higher score per action, but now I'm adding frosting to an invisible cake. My last suggestion is probably already in the works as the developer has mentioned a home-based persistence, but I'd like to see only a small set of characters available upon initial play. There's something unique and fun about unlocking more incentives as you play, and it keeps a goal ahead of you like dangling a carrot. Objective goals to unlock characters should be something difficult and worth investing time into. For example, unlocking the Doctor would be something along the lines of heal 300 HP at doctors across multiple plays. A good goal to unlock the Gorilla would be have freed gorillas attack and kill 30 scientists, or bouncers, across multiple plays. The possibilities are endless here, and each character has unique factions and interactions that create opportunities for persistence. Also, having a smaller selection of characters available from the onset would make the game feel slightly less overwhelming and create a desire to move towards new classes, i.e. I can't wait to unlock the cop because I want to know what it does. On a related note, I have a legal pad currently full to the brim with suggestions for characters, item perks, and in-world interactables and interactions. Unfortunately, there are just too numerous to go into here. I'm looking forward to compiling these and passing them out to the developer, as I've immediately clicked with Streets of Rogue, and I'm overwhelmed he has passed the opportunity to alpha test on us for free. If you've at all been interested to hear my thoughts or been taken by gameplay, the link to the free alpha download will be in the description under the video. I strongly suggest taking the time to test it out. The state the game is in currently is fantastic, but I can definitely see it growing and expanding in the future to both PC storefronts and home console platforms. I will also link the dev's Twitter if you have suggestions or feedback of your own.